Something unusual happened this week, and that is that the head of the MI6 organisation, that's the UK spy agency, and the head of the CIA, the US spy agency, got together in the same room and gave an interview. Surely a security risk, you might be thinking, to have two such important people interviewed and talking to an audience. The audience were only told 15 minutes in advance that the MI6 and CIA guys would be there. The audience were there for something else. But it's not so much about the spectacle of seeing these two guys in the same room, although it is unprecedented. It is more about what they said that is particularly interesting and worth a video. World order. And I'm not talking about the Illuminati or shadowy forces pulling the strings, although maybe there are, who knows. No, the US and the UK were talking about the current world order, as in rules that govern society today being under threat. The world order is under threat, said the US and the UK. And what do we mean when we talk about world order? Well, we generally mean institutions that have shaped global politics, economics, and security since the end of World War II or just after the Cold War. Think a lot of big acronyms that probably have some kind of influence over Western life. I'm talking the United Nations, UN. I'm talking WTO, World Trade Organization, or IMF, International Monetary Fund, or NATO, big military power. A simpler way to look at the current world order is, I like to think of the USA and friends. This idea that the United States and its Western allies have been the dominant players in the economic and military system since at least the end of the Cold War, but more realistically after World War II. But in recent years that has been challenged vocally by Russia's leader Vladimir Putin and more quietly by China. Putin has talked about it for a long time. He was very frustrated 10 years ago when he felt that the US was able to just walk into countries like Afghanistan or Iraq, but he came under pressure for going into countries like Georgia, for example, and his proposed plans to go into Ukraine, which eventually manifested first with the annexation of Crimea in 2014 and later the actual invasion, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Why are you allowed to invade countries, said Russia, and I am not allowed to invade countries? That's not a sympathetic tone towards Russia, and it's not a sympathetic tone towards the USA as well. It is just what it is. And so the UK and the US's spy chiefs got together this week amidst a growing backdrop of problems in the geopolitical sphere. As we mentioned, Russia is in Ukraine. Israel is in Gaza, and well, there's the potential looming prospect of Taiwan being invaded by China as well. And it's got a lot of people in the UK and the US in politics very concerned. So what did they say? Well, the US had intelligence. It claims that Russia is planning to cut undersea cables that could disrupt information in the US. It could affect things like the internet, and that would be part of a larger scale of sabotage. The talk of undersea sabotage may ruffle a few feathers. That's because several media organizations in the US have claimed that the Nord Stream pipe explosion, a massive act of sabotage in which a pipe delivering gas from Russia to Europe being destroyed, may have been done with the help of the US or Ukraine. This is something Russia has been saying for a long time, but the blame is still going back and forth. The West blames Russia, Russia blames the West, and while several publications are claiming that US involvement was going on with the explosion, it is important to point out there is no proof of that, and several also claim that it was still Russia. Nevertheless, the boss of MI6 and the CIA said that work was being done to disrupt the reckless campaign of sabotage across Europe by Russia. It isn't just Nord Stream pipe that they are referring to. there have been multiple incidents across Europe over the last few months in which fingers are being pointed at Russia. There have been buildings set on fire. And of course, you may remember last year in which countries were receiving hundreds, if not thousands, of calls and emails from people claiming that terrorism was imminent in schools and banks. Slovakia had one last year where they just received hundreds and hundreds of emails all across different banks and schools, and allegedly a lot of them came from Russian sources. This is not the first time that we're hearing about the idea of the world order falling apart. Viktor Orban, Hungary's leader, recently said that he believed the future of the world order would no longer be Western. Now, he's been a bit of a Western skeptic for some time. Viktor Orban has been accused of not being supportive enough of the EU's attempts to defend Ukraine, having often withdrawn from sanctions and being generally cozier and friendlier to Russia's leader Vladimir Putin. Hungary's leader believes that the future is going to be Asian-led, and if that's the case, as it stands at the moment, NATO is a huge military force, and Vladimir Putin has said that he has no intention of going to war with NATO. It would be reckless, and there's no guarantee at all that even Russia's friends would jump to its defense. China, for example, has been sort of lukewarm supportive of Vladimir Putin's invasion, but also Xi Jinping wants to play both sides. And this idea of sanctions from the US, it scares China a little bit. China wants to become the ultimate economic power, don't forget. And it can't do that if at the moment the world is governed by US rules and the US starts limiting its growth. Much better for China to grow within the system and then outgrow America. That is exactly what the CIA boss has been talking about. They also mentioned Gaza. Israel has been in Gaza for nearly 1 year now, and the US and the UK are determined to make sure that Hamas, the terrorist organization as they are ruled by the UK and the US, is flattened, is kicked out of Gaza. The bosses of MI6 and the CIA also said that they are pushing for de-escalation in the Israel-Gaza war in the Middle East, something that in its current form has been going on for nearly 1 year now. The US and the UK said they were working ceaselessly for a ceasefire and a hostage deal in the Gaza Strip. At the moment, we haven't seen much movement in this. We know that Israel is unlikely to fulfill its desires of getting rid of Hamas completely, and Hamas has accused Israel of not wanting the ceasefire in the first place. And of course, this disruption in the Middle East is very dangerous for the US-led governing system. If Iran gets involved, for example, and starts sticking up for Palestine, then the US fears it will be dragged into a war having to defend Israel. The spy chiefs also look to mitigate the damage that has come from the Ukraine and Russian war. And they said that they saw the war in Ukraine coming, as did most of us. They said by knowing in advance, they were able to warn the international community. Indeed, the US released a treasure trove of intel before Russia invaded, saying they had very solid evidence that Russia was going to go into Ukraine. They were proven right, and they said that in part by declassifying secrets to help Ukraine, the CIA and MI6 agencies exploited our intelligence channels to push hard for restraint and de-escalation. Unfortunately, de-escalation has not happened. This war has been going on in Ukraine and Russia for almost 1,000 days now, I think. We're into like 2 years. And that is where they said staying the course in Ukraine is more vital than ever. They said Vladimir Putin will not succeed in extinguishing Ukraine's sovereignty and independence, and that both their agencies would continue to aid Ukrainian intelligence as well. They're looking to continue putting more weapons in, more money, to make sure that the region is not destabilized further. It is clear that the world is looking more unstable, perhaps, than it was 10 years ago. And the US in particular has enjoyed a very nice period in which it has been the world reigning champion. But if Iran goes to war with Israel, if Russia suddenly starts to become more powerful, sucks up Ukraine's military, and then starts to look at fighting NATO, the US is going to find itself divided and having to commit to many wars that could damage its finances and its military. China may then, being quiet for the time being, may want to step in after the US has taken a battering. It is for that reason the US and the UK spy chiefs sat down and aired their concerns about the world order. We've had it pretty good for a while. Let's not lose that. That's kind of what they're saying. And also, if the world order does change and it becomes more Asian-led, have you tried learning Mandarin? It's really, really hard. So the knowledge is out there. There are many invasions going on, many wars going on. And the US and the UK have proven they are very good at being able to foresee events, being able to pick up intelligence and knowing what their rivals are planning. But in terms of action, in terms of stopping things, and in terms of knowing how to control the crisis, the UK and the US have proven they're less able. So the world order may be changing as the UK and the US fears, and well done to them for knowing. But does that mean they'll be able to stop the change? That remains to be seen.